Hi there. So I've been using this respirator in my workshop, which is a real pain. And my workshop's actually pretty dusty. So we had some professional cleaners that came in and cleaned the workshop recently, and I decided to try and keep it clean by buying a dust collector. But I didn't want to spend a lot of money, so I bought a second-hand one that was actually busted. Only paid $100 for it. It cost me $20 for a spare part, and then I spent about another $150 on ducting. And for about $300, I've got a pretty decent dust collection system that collects dust from all the machines in my workshop. This is the dust collector that I bought. It's made by King. It's a 1.5 horsepower, 1200 CFM. As you can see, it's pretty old and beaten up, but now that I managed to get it working again, it's pretty good. So I connected it to some ducting that runs around the corner here. This is just some aluminum ducting. You can see that I've then put it through these kind of gates so that I can direct the airflow from the top of the bench or to the underneath of the bench. The pipe that goes down to the underneath of my bench, I've hooked up to this long, flexible 4-inch hose, which I can take to anywhere I need it in the workshop. For example, to connect it to my table saw or my plane or something like that. And then I've got some plumbing pipes actually, which were a hassle because the 4-inch plumbing pipes are not the same thing as 4-inch ventilation pipes, it turns out. And I've got these other pipes going up to the back of the various machines. So I've got a pretty comprehensive dust collection system going here for a couple of $100, and I'm pretty happy with it. But I do have one problem, and the problem is my table saw. You can see here the table saw is a very typical, Black & Decker style table saw. There's no dust port here, so it does have a kind of port thing kind of here that I could take out. But it doesn't have a base, so it's not really going to collect dust very well. So my project today, I'm going to remove these legs, take these legs off, and I'm going to build a plywood cabinet underneath here with a dust port, so that I can collect dust from my table saw as well. In order to help me do that, I bought this like dust port here, which can be screwed onto a piece of plywood, and some wheels. I went through my scrap wood pile and found a bunch of plywood. This is all mostly 3/4 inch. I think this one here is 1/2 inch. This one's pretty rough, but that's okay. This is just for my workshop. So now I can rip that piece of wood against that straight edge. And I don't have, of course, have dust collection set up yet, but I do have this 4-inch flexible hose set up with this dust port thing on the end of it. So I'm just going to place this underneath the table saw for now. Of course, later on we'll have better dust collection, but for now, just placing this here might help a little bit. So you can see here the dust collection wasn't particularly effective. When the Bighorn dust collector did pick up a few bits, there's a few bits stuck there. You can see just around it, it's a little bit cleaner. But over here on the floor, there's quite a lot of dust. And I didn't do very much cutting, I just made a couple of cuts in a small piece of plywood. So let's compare this with the after picture when I finished the dust collection, and let's see how much better it works. So now I need to cut these two boards to 18.5 inches long, which is going to be the length of the side of the dust box for the saw. I'm going to do that on the miter saw, and we're going to see how well the dust collection is working here. Even though the suction is really high on this dust port at the back of the miter saw, you can see there's actually still quite a bit of dust that escaped here. So this is not 100%. Maybe I'll think about another way of kind of broadening out that dust port, perhaps with some sort of side flanges of some kind. I'm not sure, but that's not 100%. So these 4 pieces will make a box the same size as the table saw. One of them, of course, needs to have this dust port installed into it. So we'll install it in one of these short sides. And then, of course, we'll make the base so that it comes up, just to the bottom of the port so the dust doesn't get stuck in that corner. So I took my dust port, plonked it down here, got it square, and then just traced around it with a pencil. And now I'm going to do it with a jigsaw. Next I'm going to cut a base out of this 1/2" ply. It's pretty old, rubbishy stuff, but it's fine for a base. And so to do that, I've basically assembled my box very roughly with a couple of pipe clamps, just because this 3/4" plywood is not exactly 3/4 inch. You really have to assemble it like this to measure the inside. I want the base to fit inside the walls, so I need to measure accurately what the inside dimensions of this box will be. So at this point I have a box, the same size as my table saw, with a hole in the front for the dust port. It's gluing with some clamps, and I just need to bang in a couple of nails with the nail gun. This should be pretty solid. So the dust box piece is almost complete. I just need to screw on the dust port. I also cut another piece of plywood 2 inches larger than the dust box. Just the margin will be there for attaching the legs. And also a little bit on the floor too. I've screwed the dust port to the dust collection box, and I've also made this sort of plinth or base for the saw to stand on, and in these dados here, these that are cut in here, I'm going to make plywood legs, as you'll see in a second. So here's the end result of my afternoon's work. It didn't take too long. It's pretty robust though. This design is kind of nice because it will work with pretty much any table saw. So I can just lift the table saw off and put another one on in the future if I ever needed to. And now of course I have the 4-inch dust port. So the only thing left to do now is to see how well it works. So there's not a lot of sawdust around here. The floor is pretty clean, but it's not completely clean. There is actually a little bit of sawdust down here, and a little bit of sawdust on there. But compared with before, that's a huge improvement. So that's it for this video. I hope I've shown you that it's possible to get pretty effective dust collection for just a few $100s. Even this is a pretty big workshop, like 40 by 40 feet, but it only cost me like $300. And I've got all my machines hooked up, and my dust collection is way better than before. So this doesn't have to be expensive, doesn't have to be complicated. You too can have dust collection in your workshop.